project management models here. Basically, we focus on the PERT and CPM method. So here, if you haven't read the lecture notes yet, please first read the slides first before you start looking or watching this video. So here we use the General Foundry case as a simple example. In this project, we have a sequence of activities from activity A to activity H. Normally based on the descriptions and the relationships between all these activities, we know how to draw the networks. So based on information given here, first of all, there are two kinds of different networks. One is put activity on the nodes. Another one is put activities on the arc. So we call them AON or AOA network. So for the AOA networks, you see that from the beginning, the initial nodes to the ending node. And it doesn't matter between the beginning and ending nodes, you can label or number the different nodes differently. But important thing is the arcs. The arrow show the directions and show the relationships. Like for here, we see there are two arcs pointing into node 5, and node 5 is the starting node for activity G. So in this case, it means that activity G can only be started after both activity E and D are finished. And on the arc, we label the activity name like activity A's, or if you would like to put detailed description for different activities, you can write there. So in Excel, we see that if you want to draw the AOA network in Excel, you can simply use the shapes in Excel. First of all, to make this clear, we first whiten the whole worksheet. Double click it, and we say there's no field for this node, but we need to put a text box inside. So let's say level 1. Of course, you can modify it. There's no outlines for it. Then after you finish that, right click, you can copy paste on these nodes into different positions. And for the arcs, also please go to shapes, select the arcs, double click it, and choose the style you prefer. And in Excel, we see different cells you can type in different information. So either you can use, like for activity A, it takes 2 days to finish, if we know it's for sure. So of course, some other people want to describe the activities with more detailed in words, in other kinds of things. So let's see if we delete this one, put the text box here. You can say activity A, so let's say install certain components. And select this text box, double click it. You can rotate it to make it parallel to the arc. So let's see, in this way we want it. To counterclockwise. Okay. So that's it. In other ways also, you can copy paste the nodes here for node 3, then for activity B use simply using these kind of methods, you can draw the AOA network in Excel. After you finish that, you copy paste the whole network into Word or into other documents for your analysis. Of course, for some of you have Microsoft Visio installed in your computer, you can use that to draw the network. It's more convenient and more efficient in that way. So another case is that if we see that for this simple example, although we only have 8 activities, it also takes a long time to draw the networks. But of course, right now in the market there are different project management software available. So what you have to do if you have those software installed, like for Microsoft project installed on your computer, you simply need to provide this basic information. So in that way, the basic information is not only that, also the dependence, the preceding activities and the following activities for each activity here. So if you input this information in the software, and the software will automatically draw the network for you, either AOA or AON, with your specification. So for AON network, let's see, as the book shows also, since we want to draw it in Excel, you can use the cells and the borders in Excel functions to draw it much easier. So like say for activity A, we use 3 cells, combine them together, represent node at this point. So simply you can choose this activity. Let's for example go to these borders, select thick box border, and we need 3 of them. In the top, so simply type in activity name, the label of activity, and expected time or fixed activity duration time here. And the second box is listed for the earliest starting time, earliest finish time. And the third one is used for input the latest start time and latest finish time by each activity. So that's the case. And to obtain the earliest start time, earliest finish time, and the latest start time, latest finish time, we say for the earliest time, the ES and EF, we obtain this kind, calculate these kind of times from the starting node to the finish node. So use the forward direction. But to obtain the latest starting time and latest finish time, we must calculate from the finish node in the backward direction here. So let's see here. For those probabilities, for those activities which only has one preceding activities, then for example activity C here depends on the finish of activity A only. So in that case, the earliest starting time for activity C is the earliest finish time of activity A. And for some activities, if it depends on the completion of more than one activities, so like for activity G here, we can only start activity G when we finish both activity E and activity D. But for activity D, it will finish, the earliest finish time is in week 7 here. For activity E, it will be finished at the earliest time in week 8. So the earliest starting time for activity G is in week 8 only. And similarly, we obtain the earliest starting time for activity H. And the earliest start time plus the duration of each activity. So like here, 13 plus 2 is the earliest finish time for that activity. Since H is the last activity here, so our project, the earliest finish time for the whole project is in week 15. So the shortest time, it takes 15 weeks to finish this whole project here. After we obtain this completion time using earliest starting time, earliest finish time, then we solve the latest start time, latest finish time for each activities in the backward. So first of all, for the last activity, we first set the latest finish time equal to the earliest finish time. So for activity H here, we set the latest finish time equals 15, same as the earliest finish time for it. Then simply for each activity, the latest starting time equals the latest finish time minus the duration here. Here it takes 2 weeks to finish activity H. So the latest starting time is in week 13. Then similarly, we solve these things. So if there are only one preceding, or simply for this activity, for G here and for H here, each one of them only have one following activity. So in that case, the latest finish time for activity F and latest finish time for activity G equals the latest starting time of activity H. So equals 13. So here for G, simply because we see from the calculation, the earliest finish time also equal 13, same as the latest finish time. So there's no slack time, there's no flexibility for activity G. So if we delay activity G for more than 1 unit of time, so 1 more week, then we will delay the whole project finish time by 1 week. So in that case, but for activity F, we see that the earliest finish time is in week 7, but the latest finish time is in week 13. So based on here, we see 10 minus 4 or 13 minus 7 equals 6. It means that we can delay activity F by 6 weeks without delaying the completion of the whole project within 15 weeks. So in that way, we call that activity G is a critical activity, because the delay on this activity will delay the whole project, but activity F is not. So similar following here, to calculate the latest finish time, there's one tricky thing here is to pay attention to, like say, activity C here, because for activity C it has two following activities, E and F. So for activity E, the latest starting time is in week 4. Activity F, latest starting time is in week 10. So we say to calculate the latest finish time, we always select the minimum value of the latest starting time of the following activities. Not like the case when we calculate the earliest starting time, like for activity G here, the earliest start time is week 8. To calculate that, if it has more than 2 preceding activities, the earliest starting time is the maximum value of the earliest finish time of all its preceding activities. But just please remember, to calculate the latest finish time, we are using the opposite way. So here we are taking the minimum value in the latest starting time of the following activities. So using this kind of algorithm, we can obtain all these earliest starting time, latest starting time, earliest finish time, and latest finish time for each activities. After we finish doing this, then we see how to find the critical path. So in this way, the critical path, it relates to the activities which are critical to the completion of the whole project. So the critical activities are those that has no slack time, which means the earliest starting time and latest starting time are equal. Or in another way, people say, the latest finish time equals the earliest finish time. So based on that, we see that our critical path here is A, C, E, G, H. So this is our critical path. Also, please pay attention that for the project here, for this specific project, we only have one critical path. But for some projects, it may have more than one critical path. For example here, if we say that based on new information, the expected time to complete activity F, it changes from 3 weeks, right now let's say to be 9 weeks. So in that way, we know that the earliest finish time changed to be 13. So based on this new information, we know right now this project has 2 critical paths. One is A, C, E, G, H. Another one is A, C, F, H. So please keep in mind. And also we say most of the time, more rarely, the duration time for each activity are not fixed, are not constant values. So normally there are 4 projects for each activity for all 4. If we separate each activity to be sub-activities, there are many uncertainties embedded in activity in projects. So in that way, people use the PERT technologies to calculate the expected value, expected time for each activity, and the variances. Of course, whenever there's uncertainty, we say we use probabilities to measure its uncertainty, and finally to measure risk of project here. So based on beta distribution, we say the approximation used here that the expected activity time, T here, or in some textbooks you will see expected the E parenthesis T, or some other textbooks, some other articles will label this as T hat or T bar. So simply equals the summation of the optimistic time estimate, that the shortest time it may take to finish this activity, and the longest time, the pessimistic time, the longest time, which labeled as B, it takes to finish this activity, plus 4 times the most likely time. So if, and this summation divided by 6 is our expected activity time. So we simply see here, based on a beta distribution, the mode value here is our most likely time, and we trunk this distribution with the minimum value and maximum value. These are our A and B here. The variance simply equals the range divided by 6 and take a square. So we know the standard deviation equals the range divided by 6, which is the square root of the variance term. So after obtaining this, with the first calculate expected time for each activities, then plug in to the network, so either AOA or AON network, to calculate as what we have done so far to find the critical path. Then we know definitely based on this estimation here, we see right now the critical path, if we are using expected value of each activities for the durations, we know the critical path right now is A, C, E, G, H. But we know that although the expected time it takes to finish activity F is 3 weeks, because this time is randomly distributed and it contains some variability here. So although expected time is 3 weeks, it may take more than 10 weeks, or it may take 9 weeks, let's say, to finish activity F. So in that way we have, suppose all other variables are kept constant. In that way we are obtaining 2 critical paths. Also there are possibilities, there are probabilities that it may take more than 10 weeks. So in that way the critical path changes. So that's why we need to calculate the probabilities, the risks of finish the project within a specific time. So because we say for the project management there are 3 essential characters we need to control for people who are project managers. First is the deadline, to finish the project within the timeline. Second is a budget, to control the budget, not exceeding the available funds. Third is a specification, which means first you need to maintain the quality, also to meet the demands from the project owners. And it's not like some other kinds of management areas that you focus on one target. Here we must meet 3 targets simultaneously. And to calculate the project variance, we say for calculation convenience, normally for some researchers and in the industry, some practitioners, they treat that the project variance simply equals the summation of the variance of all those critical activities. So in that way they pay attention, they focus on the critical path only. But we know definitely, as we just discussed, it's possible that even the critical path is like here, it's A, C, E, G, H, because there are probability that this activity F may take more than 10 weeks to finish. So in that way, the variance used to calculate the uncertainties of the completion time of the whole project, it also need to take into account the probabilities that of all paths, all possible paths to be finished within a specific deadline. So here we are using a normal distribution to calculate the probability that the project can be finished within a specific time. And right now I think it's easier for you to read through these steps and to follow that. And in Excel also simply just plug in the Excel functions, like here for the z-value. For our case here, if we calculate the project variance assume that all the activities in this project are independent. So in that case, we simply sum them up, the variances of all these critical activities up, as to use this sum as the project variance. Because other people arguing that for a real project it may contain more than 100 or more than 500. For big construction company, big construction project, it may contain more than 1,000 different activities. So in that case, if we calculate, or if we take into account uncertainty of all different paths, not only the critical path, in that way it's almost impossible for you to calculate. So some people argue that using the critical path activities variances, it will obtain us a close enough approximation for the variance of the whole project. But in nowadays, with the help of computer software, so still it's easier, and normally for those practitioners with the computer, normally they don't need to calculate this kind of project variance terms here, because those software will calculate the variance automatically for them with higher precision in that case. But for our example here, let's say based on the variance of all those critical path activities, we did that the project variance is calculated as 112 divided by 36. So this is our project variance. To calculate the probability that this project can be finished within, let's say, 16 weeks, because the expected time to finish this project, as we calculate using the CPM method, is 15 weeks. So we know first the variance of the project equals 112 divided by 36. So the standard deviation is a 1.76383, something like that. And we know the mean level equals 15. And right now we want to calculate the probability that this project can be finished within 16 weeks. So with all this kind of information given, if you want to use the z-value, first of all, z-value equals x is 16 minus the mean level divided by standard deviation. I'm sorry, first we need a parenthesis here. First take the difference, then divided by standard deviation. This is our z-value. So for this z-value, based on standard normal distribution, we can calculate the cumulative probability terms using the norm S. This is the function in Excel, which gives us a probability of 0.71462. Alternatively, you can use the general normal distribution function. Simply use norm dist without S. So in that way, first we need to provide the first argument, which is the x value. Second is the mean level of this normal distribution. Third argument is the standard deviation value. And the last one, the fourth one, because right now we want to obtain the cumulative probability terms, not the density, so you need to type in 1. If you type 0, it will return the density value instead of probability value. So we see we obtain the same values if you're using the standard normal distribution, or if you use a general normal distribution case. So also we see, since right now we focus on using spreadsheet modeling things, so and we don't have the project management software available, but we see if we apply the network modeling, network LP model in Excel on this project management, we can use it to find the critical paths based on this simple mathematical LP model. So first of all, we want to minimize the time difference between the initial node and the final node. And also for each arcs, because this LP model for project management based on network algorithm here, and in spreadsheet modeling Excel, we say we only can use the AOA network. We cannot use the AON network. So for each arc, we see that the ending node time, it almost, because right now each arc stands for different activities for each activity. So for each activity, its ending time must be larger than or equal to its starting time plus its duration. So it's very easy after we specify this kind of constraints. Also, initially we say for the first node in AOA network, initial node always, we say for activity A and activity B, for in this example, the earliest starting time is always 0 from the current time point. So if we open the CPM LP Excel file, we see that our decision variables are this node time. For each node, what time it is. And right now we only care that we try to minimize the difference between the node time of the ending node and the initial node. And also, of course, at the starting point, we say for decision variables, always we assign some unreasonable values. We can also set all node time to be 0, which means all starting time, all ending, all earliest starting time, all earliest finishing time for these different activities equals 0. And we want to use the Excel solver, use the LP model to tell us what our optimal solution should be, in which way we can find our critical path. So based on this model, just pay attention that the critical path, if we use LP model, are those those activities that associate with constraints which have shadow price to be larger than 0, have positive shadow prices. So use the example here. If we say initially we set up all these to be 0, and our constraints in this to find the critical path, the CPM method in LP here simply equal the ending time for each activity must be larger than or equal to the starting time plus its duration. But this project here, we say the duration for each activity are fixed. There's no uncertainty. Of course, if there's uncertainty, we can calculate the expected time. It's the same logic here. And also to speed up the processing in Excel's spreadsheet modeling, we use the VLOOKUP function here. Because otherwise, you need to point to different cells for each activity one by one. So it takes time to type in all those formulas. But here we first use VLOOKUP formula, VLOOKUP functions in this cell and this cell. Then we copy paste into the whole range. So if you are not familiar with VLOOKUP function, please spend some time to check how it works. So if we go to solver, you will see the setup in the solver. We are minimizing the project time, which is in cell B30. And by changing our decision variables, its event time as decided in this red box here. The constraints are simply the ending time for each activity is larger than or equal to the starting time plus the duration. And of course, please check the linearity and the non-activity boxes here. So after that, we click solve button. We'll see that the shortest time to finish this project is 23 units of times, either in days or in weeks. And then to find the critical path, please click sensitivity. In the sensitivity report, you will see that for activities with shadow price larger than 0, these activities are critical activities, so from which we can define the critical path. Another topic in project management here is regarding to crash certain activities to meet a deadline, to reducing the project time, because there are too many uncertainties when we carry out a project. If safe to build a house like a new business school building, so normally even we plan well enough, but always some unexpected things happen, like a tornado coming into Americus, Georgia, or the electricity was cut off due to some energy issues, due to some budget issues, or for the trucks to deliver those construction materials may have accidents on I-75 something. All these kind of different issues will delay the whole project. So to meet the deadline, of course for different activities, we know for one specific activity, normally we can expedite it. We can shorten the duration of it by input more resources, like hire more people to work on that activity, or use advanced technologies, use new machinery, use new materials, which will bring, of course, which will cost us much more. So in that case, here we introduce the new terminologies. First is a crash cost compared to the normal cost previously, if we don't consider the crash. And also with higher cost, we know it's shorter. The duration is smaller compared to the duration during normal time. So we say for each activity we can calculate first the crash cost per unit of time. So like for a simple example here, in this example we have 5 activities. So each activity have normal time it takes to finish, and if we, let's say for activity A here, to evaluate all the process, if we use 32 days to finish this activity, it will cost us $640. But of course we can finish it within 20 days, but which will cost us $800 in total. So it means it will cost us $160 more if we shorten the time duration for this specific activity by here 12 days, which means for each unit of time, I'm sorry, here it's not measured in days, it's measured in hours. For each unit of hours shortened for this activity, we must pay $13.33. So for each activity we can calculate this kind of the cost per correction hour. So this is a network, the AOA network for this example here. Simply based on this network, we see that the critical path is DNS, WNS, and INT. because on the top it takes 32 plus 40 plus 120, so in total it's 192 hours to finish if we're using this path. But in the bottom path we see that 50 plus 24 plus 120, so it's 194 hours to finish. This is the longest path, which is also the critical path of this project. But to crash this project, first we say always start crashing the whole project by crash activities on the critical path, because for activities not on the critical path, it doesn't make sense if you crash it or not, because we can only shorten the completion time of the whole project first by considering to reduce the time duration of one or more than one activities on the critical path. But pay attention here that although later on we will say how to use the LP model to find the optimal solutions to crash which activity by how many units of time, all these things. Pay attention here, let's say based on our calculation for the cost per crashing hour, we already see that the smallest cost is regarding to the activity write new software, is a WNS. And we see after always first when you crash the whole project, we always first crash the activity which on the critical path which contains the smallest crashing cost per unit of hour. So we crash this one by 1 unit, 1 hour, which it bring the 24 hours duration into 23. Then you need to check again to see whether this critical path maintains, because let's say if we crash by 2 hours here, let's say this one becomes 22 hours to finish, then for this project we have 2 critical paths. And when in that case, if suppose WNS takes 22 hours right now to finish, so if we want to reduce the whole project completion time by 1 more unit of time, we need to consider for 2 ways. First, if we want to reduce the duration of activities on both critical paths, you need to find for each critical path on this one the smallest crashing cost per hour. So let's suppose in that case still this WNS, first of all, still it takes $8 to reduce by 1 more unit or 1 more hour. Then the second is DNS. On this one, still on the same path. We know that right now we have 2 critical paths. So reduce if we do not consider INT activity. So in that way you need to consider reduce this bottom part by 1 unit, by 1 more hour. Also reduce at the same time reduce the top part by 1 more hour. Only in that way we can reduce the whole project by 1 hour. So please keep in mind, but then also to consider the costs regarded. So on the top, for those 2 activities, we know the EOP contains smaller cost per crashing hour, $13. And in the bottom parts, among those 2 activities, the WNS, which is $8 cost of $8 per crashing hour. So in that way, to reduce, if we only consider this part, we ignore INT right now. So we know that we have to pay every hour, every additional hour reduction in the completion time with the cost of $13.33 plus $8. So that's $21.33. But of course, in that way, we need to consider if we only considering reducing the duration of this activity here. So this activity, it costs us, the additional cost is $16 only to reduce it by 1 more unit of hour. So in that way, comparing the summation of the reduction cost here with the reduction cost of this activity INT, we know it's better for us to reduce activity INT by 1 more unit of time. So just keep in mind. But we know in this way, we need to keep checking whenever we reduce the completion time by 1 more unit at a time. We need to considering to check the critical path again to compare the unit cost, the unit hour correction cost of all activities, which is time consuming, because even now we see that only for 5 activities already it takes a long time to find optimal solutions. But using LP model, we argue that it's more efficient. So inside here, we try to find an optimal solution with the purpose to minimize the total correction costs while meet the deadline of 160. Based on this model, we say the normal time it takes to finish the whole project is 194 hours. Suppose right now, based on the new contract, you are required to finish the project within 160 hours. While in that way, we need to consider, first of all, to define the critical path. So you will see the similar structure like here for the node times. And based on sensitivity report, we know which are the critical paths. But then the time for each activity are changing, because in this case we also consider the additional decision variables that correction each activity by how many hours. So this is a correction decisions here in this range. So similar to previous case, for the CPM part, we know that the ending time for each activity should larger than or equal to the starting time plus the duration of each activities. But here also, from the function for each cell, you will see it only takes into account the amounts of reduction of new additional decision variables here for each activity. Reduce how many hours. And then the target cell, simply we are using the sum product functions, which is correction hours for each activity and the cost per day or per hours used. I'm sorry, here should be cost per hour, since we are measuring the time unit in hours. Okay, initially we set all these decision variables to be 0. So you are seeing all these ending times and reductions to be zeros. So if we enable solver, here we see the target cell is the total reduction cost, total correction cost. We try to minimize it. While changing the decision variable, first is node time. We are using this to find the critical path. Second is the correction decision variables here in this range. And some additional constraints here. First, in this one, is the deadline constraints. Right now you are required to finish it within 160 hours. The second constraint we see is as before, as in the CPM LP model. That's the ending time should be larger than or equal to the starting time plus the duration minus that number of hours crashed. And the third groups are that regarding to how many hours are crashed, the maximum number of hours crashed available for you to crash. So all these, after specify them, also don't forget the linearity and the non-activity constraints. Then if we click solve button, we'll see right now the total correction cost is $528 while meeting the deadline that to finish the whole project within 160 hours. So that's how to use Excel to draw the network, to find the critical path, and to crash the whole project.